So explorations in GA4 are on-demand mini reports. They let you find data that you can't normally see in the standard reports in Google Analytics 4. They're very useful as well if you want to use filters that are a little bit more complex and might not be available in those standard report features. There are many different types of explorations that you can build on demand. Right here in the GA4 interface, we have a template gallery here at the top, where Google has provided us with a lot of templates to get our ideas moving, think about different ways that we can visualize data, and maybe some data points that we're not digging into yet that are newly available in this platform that we're not taking advantage of yet. So if you click into the template gallery up here, there are a lot more, but the three most common ones are featured here at the top. They're called Freeform, Funnel Exploration, and Path Exploration. So we're going to do a demo of all three of these today so that you can see how each of them works. But before we get into that, let's just talk about how to get here, how to make an exploration, how to share them, etc. So we got here by going to the left-hand menu under the Explore tab, and that's where you get to this feature. You can then click into any template that you would like, or you can click this plus to create a blank exploration of any type that you would like. You can, or these will auto-save, so when you create a new one, it will show up on this list down here of all the explorations that you've created in the past. You can also remove these as you would like using this more actions dots, and you can see that you can bump them out into a new tab. You can share them as well with other people who have access to your Google Analytics 4 property. You can duplicate them as a starting point for a new exploration and give them custom names or remove them as needed. You can also make these private, so you'll notice that on the left under type, if it's a single user image, then that means only you, the holder of the email login that you used, is able to see this. The ones that have two users depicted are available to anybody with access to your property. So you can change those privacy settings however you'd wish. If you prefer to fiddle around with one of these without anybody else seeing it until you're ready to share it, then you have that option. Okay, so what do we do if we want to share this with somebody outside of the organization or somebody who doesn't have access to your Google Analytics? You can export these as PDFs. If you go into an individual one, this is an option in the top right corner. So if you do want to share it more widely, PDF is likely the best option for that. All right. So let's get into the three most common types of explorations. We're going to start with a freeform exploration. I like to think of these as somewhat of a painter's setup. So think of this left-hand side column over here as your painter's palette. And this is where you include all of the paint colors that you think you may potentially want to use in your painting. So those are dimensions and metrics that we might want to use to build a report. The second column is where we're loading up our paintbrush. And this is the things that we actually want to put on this canvas and visualize. So you can, as you're loading up your palette, you can look at the full menu of dimensions, the full menu of metrics. There's so many to choose from. The easy way to think about the difference between dimensions and metrics is that dimensions are things that are unique values, typically text-based values that are going to change every time, whereas metrics are constant events that can be counted. So you have two examples here of metrics: event count, that can be counted, and sessions, those can be counted. Whereas dimensions, something like event name, each event is going to have a different name, so it's different text, so this is a dimension. We have built this one out with just a couple of dimensions and a couple of metrics to keep it really simple. The basics that you need in every exploration, if it's a freeform exploration, are a rows value, and then down here, a values value. So let's go ahead and remove that extra piece of information we had there, just so you can see what it looks like with just those two minimum items. So we have row for landing page, and then we have a value for event count. So this is how many events happened on each page. You will also notice that what I just removed was a column value. If you want this very simple 2-column and then multiple rows setup to be broken down a little bit more, that's when you add columns. So I'm going to add an event name column to this, and you'll see it broke down these event count numbers by the name of the event that is being counted. So we have currently we're looking at all different kinds of click events. We're looking at internal clicks, external clicks, call clicks, email clicks, as well as a totals row down here. So if you try to build this out on your own and you choose the same rows, the same columns, and the same values that we're looking at here, you will be seeing something quite a bit different. You'll see a lot more columns with a lot more event names in them. So we actually narrowed this one down to just show click events by adding a filter. So filters are where these explorations get extremely helpful and actually help you see what you want to see. So let's scroll down into our second column for the setup that we have on here. We have an event name filter on this for any event that contains the word click. So that's how we narrowed it down to just these 4. We could also change this to be whatever we wanted it to be, such as events that have the word form in them. We could use a regular expression to look for multiple values with or conditions in between. We could really do whatever we want here. We can also layer filters on top of each other. So right now we're looking at form events on landing pages in all channels. If we wanted to narrow this down to a particular channel, or maybe a particular campaign, or anything available in the dimensions menu, we can build a filter based on that too. So I'm going to quickly do one for channel. And we will choose any channel that exactly matches organic search. And apply that. So now you can see we have 2 filters that are stacked, and they're both applying to this full data set. All right, so another example of how we could visualize this data if we wanted to break it down by channel instead of landing page. Here's a quick example of what that would look like. We would just drag channel over here. Then we would get rid of our landing page rows, and then there we have it. It's simplified down to channel and event count by event name. You can also change how many rows you're able to see. Right now this is set to show 500 rows. There are just only 4 available. But if you want to expand or contract this based on how many rows you want to be previewing with an audience or something along those lines, that's available. You can also control how many columns and column groups that you have. Finally, we have some visualization options. Right now we have heat mapping applied to the cells, so you can see that highest numbers are darkest. We can also change it to just plain text if we'd like, or we can change it to be a bar chart. So that is our free-form visualization. You can also see that there are other options for what this data looks like, so we could change that to anything that we would like. And then it's a little bit interactive where you can hover over things. All right, next let's look at the funnel report. So the funnel is very useful for building out what you understand to be your own sales funnel that occurs on your website or app. So we've built out this example with 4 different steps. The first step you'll want to build out is something that's very broad. It just indicates that you just got an impression from that user. So we chose session start. And then your next step, you would want to choose something that indicates that there's some interest there in your brand. So we chose scroll as our interest stage funnel event. Next, we would want something that indicates that they're in the research stage or the consideration stage. So the event that we chose to represent that is an internal link click, because it shows a little bit more engagement, a little bit more of a research intent. And then finally, you can end with your conversion event that you are focusing on for this funnel exploration. So I will show you how these are built out. They're all event-based, so for some of these, we've just chosen a single event to represent the funnel stage. So that's true for this first one, session start, second one, scroll, and third one, internal engagement link click. This one is a custom event that we built through Google Tag Manager. For the conversion step, we've done something a little bit more complicated. We've chosen 3 different events with an or condition in between them. So this conversion step will count if this or this or this occurs. You can also add parameters if you've built out custom events through Google Tag Manager that have specific parameters tied to them. You can use the parameters to filter down what is going to be included in this funnel step in your exploration. And there are also time constraints that you can add if you'd like, so that you can restrict whether the event is going to be counted based on how much time is in between each step. All right, so right now, let's just look at a very basic funnel report. We have our 4 steps that we just looked at, and we have how many users completed each step, and then how that breaks down in terms of the completion rate and the abandonment rate for each step. We can make this a little bit more detailed though. So let's say this isn't quite what we need for our purposes. We would really like to know if people on mobile convert at a higher rate than people on desktop. So we would then add a breakdown dimension right here. So I'm going to take device category, drag it to breakdown, and then we have all these different rows to show the number of users that completed each step by device. And so this is extremely handy. We can see that the mobile completion rate is quite a bit lower than the desktop completion rate. So this is when we want to audit our mobile UX. If we're curious about like whether a specific set of pages or a specific content group is really the culprit for that lower completion rate, then we could always add a filter down at the bottom for a specific landing page group. All right, so this has a lot of different features that you can see in this second column. We can make it an open funnel, which is not showing anything at the moment. We can add comparisons based on segments that we have that are pre-built There's some here, or you can customize your own. You can also do rows or columns restrictions to show more or less data. And you can show the time that has elapsed in between each step, which is another very handy feature. You can kind of tell where people are getting stuck. All right, so that's the funnel. And remember, you can choose any events that you would like to build out these steps. So even if you're just looking at steps that indicate the initial stages of the funnel and you don't even want to go all the way down to that conversion, that is definitely valuable as well. All right, we're going to dig into the last one, which is the path exploration report. So to create one of these, you would just click on this template for path exploration in the gallery, but we're going to click on the pre-built one that we've already made. This one is a little bit more restricted in terms of how much you can customize. We have nodes, which are the data that's showing up in each of these columns or stages of the user's path. And we can not customize these very much. We always start with session start because that's how the user began their session. That's how their path began. And then for each step after that, we can choose to look at page path, which is the URI or URL slug. So that's what we're looking at right now. Or we can choose to look at page title. So if your title tags are a little bit long, which it should be right around 50, 60 characters, then they might not fit on this screen. So I really prefer to look at page path. All right, and you can interact with this however you'd like and go through various user paths. For example, we might want to see how a user's behavior differs whether they entered the website through the homepage or through a blog post. So to look at what they did when they landed on the homepage, we would click up here on the homepage, and then it takes us through the next steps in their journey. So let's see, I'm interested in those who started on the homepage and went to a service. I would click there, and you can continue to click through the journey until it ends. Some of these are quite a bit longer than others, so you can see how that plays out. So then you can compare that, for example, to somebody who entered the website through a blog. So instead of looking at more high-level company pages like those homepage users did, these users decided to look at more resources, including templates and downloads, a different blog, and then some of them chose to look at service pages or the homepage. So that you can then click through that journey and see what that was all about. I've also added a breakdown already to this example. So we're looking at a country breakdown that shows up here at the bottom. And so right now we're looking at unfiltered data, but if we were to hover over US, then it will just show us US data, hover over UK, and so on, and it filters the entire report for you on demand. Very cool feature. And then finally, you can change the value that you're looking at. Right now I'm looking at just the total number of people that did each of these stages of this user path. But I could be looking, for example, at active users instead, which would mean any user that spent more than 10 seconds on the page, visited more than 2 pages, or completed a conversion event. Any of those things would qualify them as an active user. So those would be the people that we're especially interested in looking at because they're showing great interest in our brand. You can also add filters just like we've seen in our other examples in this video. We won't get into that too much. However, if you wanted any of these breakdown dimensions, for example, to be a permanent filter instead of having to hover and play around with it, then you would add that down here so it just always applies. Awesome. Well, thanks for exploring with us. If you have any questions, please reach out to OneUpWeb. We would be 100% happy to walk you through anything related to GA4. We really love the platform and it's a lot of fun. Thanks.